Edge ICT design principles. Now, send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications.
Welcome, my fellow cable aficionados. Glad to have everybody here today. Um, how's everybody doing today? It's almost the weekend. Almost the weekend. Whoop. Yes, yes. Do you have anything fun planned for the weekend? Let me know in the chat box. So I got lots of stuff in the lots of irons in the work, and next week is Thanksgiving week, so there will not be an after hours next week on Thursday. Okay, no after hours next week because of Thanksgiving. Is it next week or is it the week after? I don't know. This month is just flying by. It is just flying by. Well, the week of Thanksgiving, no show, no show. So welcome everybody. Hope everybody's doing okay. I see Mr. George is in the house. Hello, George. How are you doing, buddy? Hope you're recovering from your surgery well. So we always start every show off with a tradition. I can't remember what the tradition is. What was that tradition? What was it? Oh yeah. What are you drinking? What are you drinking? I'm drinking Inland Gray tea because it's kind of cold in Florida. It's below 70 degrees. So, so I'm drinking tea. What are you drinking? Let me know in the chat box. Shotzi is in the house. Welcome back, Mr. Shotzi. Glad to have you back, buddy. Um, again, my thing's only showing one thing, but I got three people talking to me in the chat box. Let me know in the chat box where you're viewing this stream from. Is it Facebook? Is it YouTube? Is it LinkedIn? Let me know which stream that you're watching this from. So, Shotzi was drinking Dr. Pepper. Um, George, you didn't tell us what you were drinking. What are you drinking, Mr. George? Let us know. Let us know, buddy. Let me fix that camera just a smidgen. So, Shotzi's watching from YouTube. George, where are you watching from, buddy? So, let's talk about before we get started with the show. Oh, acronym challenge. That's right. I knew there was another. I knew there was something I was missing, and I'm going easy on everybody tonight. I'm going easy. This is the acronym because this week acronyms begin with the letter U. So the acronym for this week is UTP. 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 What does UTP stand for? Anybody know? UTP. Let me know in the comment box if you know what UTP stands for. It's something that you probably touch every day if you're in this industry. Or you either touch it, or you talk about it, or you estimate it, or you design it. There's something about this. It stands for three, two, one. U transfer protocol. That would be an incorrect answer, Mr. George. Incorrect answer. Let's see if Shotzi got the right answer. Unshielded twisted pair. Shotzi got it correct. 10,000 points for Mr. Shotzi for the correct answer, buddy. 10,000 points. Way to go. So before I get started with the Q&A stuff tonight, it's Veterans Day. I just want to say thank you to every veteran out there for your sacrifice and things that you did that allow people like me to do the things that I do. I just want you to know, even though I was never in the military, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you've done. So happy Veterans Day to you. Now let's talk about the shows. I've got a whole bunch of shows lined up, and I'm trying to record them all this week and next week so I can schedule them so that way when I'm on vacation, they'll still come out all on regular times. Now, the shows, I'm going to tell you the content that we've got already slated, but this is not the order in which it's going to post. I haven't decided what order I'm going to post them in yet. So the first one is I'm going to have a conversation with Jonathan Jew. Jonathan Jew is the in leadership position on many ANSI committees, and we're going to talk about the administration standard. We're going to talk about what's in it, why they label things the way they do, and then we're also going to talk about what's in the new D standard, what changes have that. And then he reached out to me today, and he said that he would like to Um, maybe discuss some other things with the ANSI standards too. So I told him it's up to him, and we're good to go. So Rick is in the house as well, right? Rick says, "Go Shotzi," and currently sipping some Pendleton and water while I work. Very cool, very cool. Yep, Shotzi's a pretty smart fella. I've known Shotzi for a couple years now, so he's a pretty smart guy. So that's one of the shows. Another show that I got in a lot, and I'm doing the interview tomorrow at 6 p.m. I think, if I remember right. We're going to talk about the chip shortage that's the country's facing right now, and we're going to talk about how that impacts us in the ICT industry. Because you're probably thinking, chip shortage? We do cabling. Well, how does that affect us? Well, we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about what's driving that chip shortage as well. And oh yeah, thank you, Mr. George. Make sure that you have your acronym spayed or neutered. Help control the acronym population. Thank you, Mr. George. And it's funny when your audience knows your thing better than you know your thing. Good job, Mr. George. And then another show. This is actually recording on Friday night as well. Interview with a Bixie technician. Interview with a Bixie technician. So we're going to ask him his career path and what that certification has done for him. And here's the twist: it's my brother. It's my brother. Yeah. So we're probably gonna tell stories on each other. When we get done with that show, you're probably gonna think a little less of me because some of the stupid things that I've done when I was younger. But so that's gonna be kind of cool, right? And then the show that I'm really, really looking forward to the most is I'm doing a cable mythbusters. Cable mythbusters. Yeah, you heard me right. What does that mean? So, so there's a lot of myths that go around in our industry. Like for one, does T568A versus T568B, did they perform the same? Or T568B performs better than A, or A performs better than B? I took a piece of cable, 100 feet, terminated at 568B, tested it, cut off the ends, terminated at 568A, and I submitted it to AEM. And we're gonna evaluate those test results. So you get to see which is better, or are they both the same? And then the other part of that Mythbusters is I went to Home Depot and I bought some Category 6 cable and some Category 6 connectors. So I took that cable, I terminated it, I tested it, and then I took some cable and some connectors from a tier one manufacturer. I don't want to say who it is because they're not sponsoring the show and they don't know that I did that. So I don't want to say who it was, but it's one of the major tier manufacturers. It's a commercial grade Cat 6 system, and I terminated it and I tested it. And we're going to see which performs better. If either performs better, right? What does the Cat 6 from Home Depot perform better, or does the Cat 6 from the Gray Bar, the Annixter, the CEC perform better? We tested that. And then another one we tested was another myth is untwisting pairs. Untwisting pairs. So a lot of people, and myself included, will tell you that when you're terminating a jack, take your thumb and four fingers, grab the pair, the half twist backwards. It's going to open up the pairs, and then use the pair separation tower to push it in and punch it down. And then there's other people who will take a piece of a cable jacket and they'll untwist the pairs all the way back to the jacket, or use an untwist tool, and then they'll turn it that way. So we're going to test it. One that's untwisted, and the other that's done the way that we just untwisted that tiny little bit to get in there. Which one performs better? You have to tune in to find out for that one. And then the fourth myth that we busted or discussed that week, or not in that show, is going to be straight through. Right. So you hear 568A, 568B. Oh, it doesn't really matter as long as it's straight through. It doesn't really care what colors or what. So I took a cable and I terminated it straight through on both sides, and I tested it. And then I compare that to one that's terminated 568B. So those are the four myths that we're going to bust in that episode. And of course, like I said, AEM is going to come in. We're going to look at the test results. We're going to look at the graphs. We're going to explain the red line and what all that means. It's going to be a good show. Going to be a good show. Now, with that being said, let's get on with the show. Right. Oh, by the way, did you know I'm on TikTok? TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Lots of stuff, lots of content going out now. I found a way to where one post goes to multiple places. So I like that, like that. And also make sure you submit your questions. Submit your questions. I do have some here. I'm not sure if it'll take us to 6:30 or not. We're already at 6:10. And so we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So the first question, and I'm surprised he is not here, is comes from Aaron. Aaron is he shot a couple questions in the past via YouTube. Let me just check the chat box real quick to make sure he's not here. Aaron, if you're here, say something in the chat box so that we know you're here. So he submitted a pretty long, involved question, right? So matter of fact, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and pull up his thing real quick, right? Because it was so long that I couldn't put it in the chat box. But here's the crux of his question was actually several, as a matter of fact. So here's the first question of the two, right? Put that up so you can see. So he said, conduit has an established fill ratio, 40% for new construction, largely to allow for the proper fire stopping and to prevent jamming around bends. But does this ratio apply to J hooks as well, since those are not concerns? So there we go. That was his question. So his real question is there a fill ratio for J hooks? But before I answer that, I have to cover his 40% number because he said the 40% number is largely due for fire stopping and for keeping cables from getting jammed up in bends and turns. He's only half correct. The fill ratio is found in the standards, and it's if you have three or more cables, it's supposed to maintain a 40% fill ratio. And that's to help so you pull the cable through the conduit and it doesn't get you don't have to pull too hard on it. You pull too hard on a cable, you're going to stretch the copper, you're going to untwist it, cause you problems. That 40% number does not apply to fire stopping. Does not apply to fire stopping. Okay. Fire stop fill ratios. They can be anywhere from as low as 18% to as high as 100%. You have to actually read the UL drawing to find out what is the fill ratio for that system. And if you exceed that fill ratio or you don't exceed that fill ratio, you're going to cause yourself some problems. So the fill ratio is not for fire stopping, Aaron. Okay. Now, the second part of your question was, let me flip back over that real quick. You said about the J hooks. Then he said most manufacturers list their capacity at 70%. Seems to suggest otherwise. What about 100%? So I've never really been asked that fire stop fill ratio question before. So what I did was, um, I actually called. I sent that message out to Invent, or they used to be Caddy. They're Invent now, and I shot a message to David, and I said, David, is there a fill ratio for J-hook? And he's like, well, yeah, there is a fill ratio, but you got to keep in mind that the fill ratios that are published out there are just general guidelines. And when they publish them, they everybody uses different numbers for the cable size, and so you'll get different numbers for as far as the charts. But the crux of it is, if you're doing J hooks, talk to that manufacturer and find out what is their fill ratio. Now, Invent actually he sent me over this chart, and this is just right straight from their catalog, so I'm not giving out any proprietary information here. This is their cable capacity chart, and this is based on their 70% fill and cables with the outside dimensions listed here. Let me put on my safety glasses so I can read those. So Cat 5, he's saying, okay, the outside diameter is 0.21. Cat 6 is 0.23. Cat 6A is 0.30. Cat 7 is 0.29. Cat Fiber is 0.20. So just to kind of give you an example, the Cat 6A, he has it listed as 0.30. I happen to know for a fact that the standard allows for Cat 6A to be up to 0.357. And there are some manufacturers that have category 6A all the way down to 0.25. Matter of fact, that jacket I showed you right before I went off screen here was one of those 0.25 category 6A cables. So, like I said, this is just a general guideline. So don't necessarily use these numbers. If you have a particular system that you want to know how many cables you can get into a J hook, reach out to him to tell him the number and types of cables, and he will actually tell you exactly how many cables you can put in there. So now the reason they say 70% is because at 70%, when you look at any system, whether it's a J hook system or cable tray system, it's never 100% because when you put cables in a system, there's always going to be space in between each of those cables. So you're never going to get it at 100%. 100%. So 70% is the guideline that they typically are going to follow. So then he followed that up with if you have 60 Cat 6A cables, could you fill one 2-inch J hook to 100%, and then another with 10% at 20%? The first one would be full, but the second one would have room for expansion? Or does each of those have to be at 70%? Now, my response to that would be if you have those two J hooks side by side, or maybe in a J hook tree where you got one above, below the other, or whatever, they're right next to each other. It's okay to fill one to one of them to 70%, which is the max fill for that system, and then have your growth for the other one in the second J hook, as long as they're right next. Now, if they're 5 feet apart, 10 feet apart, you're gonna want to make sure you have room to grow. Make sure you have room to grow. Right. So, I hope that answers your question, Mr. Aaron. So, and also, it's also manufacturer specific. Manufacturer specific. So, make sure that you understand that. Question number 2. Again, if you have a question, make sure you put it in the chat box. Put your questions in the chat box. Okay, I got to change that thing out. Sorry about that. And the second question comes from Gary in Georgia. And he says, Chuck, I'm working in a catwalk and we seem to have an argument between me and my supervisor. He says I need a full body harness with a lanyard while working on a catwalk. Do I or do I not? Okay, so the answer is yes. You need a body harness and you need a lanyard. You do. You absolutely do. Now, when you actually look at different things, they're going to tell you what you're going to have to use for as far as body harnesses and lanyard. A lanyard is just a nylon rope with a hook on the end of it. It's got a locking keeper on it, so that way it locks in. It's got that on both sides. That's what a lanyard is. Um, so what you really got to do is you got to look at the situation. If you're in like a platform that elevates and you're completely surrounded with safety devices like a cage or whatever, you don't need a body harness. You don't need a lanyard. Okay. If part of it's open, then you do need a body harness with one lanyard. If you're in if you leave that lift, like you go to a catwalk or whatever, you need a body harness and two lanyards. Two lanyards. Now you probably wonder, why do you need two lanyards? You need two lanyards because you have to have 100% contact. 100% contact. And what that means is, think about this. If you got that lanyard attached to something, when you're walking down the catwalk and you go to an end, right? And then you got to disconnect and put it on the other side of the support system. When you disconnect, even though it's for a short period of time, you are not 100% contact, are you? So two lanyards. That way, when you're disconnecting the first one to latch on the other side, and you latch in. Now you're latched in. You're still latched with the other one, but your new one's latched in. And then when you disconnect the second one, you connect it on the other side. You always have at least one rope 100% contact. One rope has 100% contact at all times. So that's going to be pretty critical. So um, that's a good question. I never had that question before about body harnesses and lanyards. I appreciate that one, Mr. Gary. So the next one comes from David, and I shortened it down because I only have a certain number of characters to put in there. His question is: I heard my boss talking about building out a voice frame, and he built it, and they said they used mushrooms, and I was afraid to ask what that was. What is a mushroom? So I assume from his question that he's probably a somewhat new to the industry, not necessarily brand spanking new, but somewhat new. So a mushroom is a term that we used to call our spools. When you look at a 66 frame or a 110 frame, there's this little white spool that you could get. You can get it with just a spool, or you can get it with a screw on the end, or you can get it with a bolt on the end. And you would screw that into the wood right above the 66 block, and you'd use that to route the cross connect cabling. Now, the reason they call it a mushroom is because the end is kind of flattened out, so that way the cross connect cable doesn't come off of that mushroom. So that's what they mean by a mushroom. It's generally used to route cross connect cabling, and you find it the majority of the time on 66 blocks and 110 blocks. You may find it somewhere else, but that's where the majority of them were actually kind of used. Then the next question comes from Carol, and Carol asks, "I saw a 23-inch wide rack in the warehouse. Where would I use that?" So a lot of people don't know this. There's two size racks that we generally use in the ICT industry, right? That's a 19-inch wide rack and a 23-inch wide rack. So a 19-inch wide rack generally is going to have what we're going to use for ICT because all of our patch panels and horizontal wire managers, they're all 19 inches wide. So they're made to fit inside that 19-inch wide rack. So if you're doing data applications, stuff like that, that's generally what you're going to find. The 23-inch rack is going to be used for most of the time the service provider, the access provider. They're putting in big pieces of equipment inside of that. So their rack's a little bit wider. Now, if you have a 23-inch wide rack and you need to put some patch panels in it, they do make these reducers that you can screw on the side of a 23-inch rack, and it comes in and makes it a 19-inch place. So you can actually put a regular 19-inch rack there. So you can use one, but that's going to be an awful big rack, and they're usually a little bit heavier grade and a little bit more expensive. So I wouldn't use a 23-inch rack for ICT unless there was some extenuating circumstances, but you can. You certainly can. You really, really can. All right, so let's talk about the next question. Next question comes from Tanya, and this came to me via LinkedIn. And she says, "Can I substitute fire stop in my floor penetrations?" And she said she had sleeves with grout instead of using cementuous fire stop. No, you can't. I know they seem similar. I know they seem the same, right? But they're not the same. Trust me, they are not the same. Cementuous fire stop has additional chemicals inside of it, which keeps it from cracking. Right, keeps it from cracking, and also it's gonna if you use the grout over time, it could fracture and then fall out, and then it's not even like having a fire stop. And when you use grout, because it's a hard surface, it makes it really hard to re-enter with new cables. So the answer to your question is no, Tanya. And I appreciate the question though. I definitely appreciate that question. And then now we got another question. We got this one is from Amanda, and this will be, I think, the end of the question submitted to me ahead of time. So if you have a question, make sure you put it in the chat box. And this one comes from Amanda, and she says, "Can you give me some tips for cleaning fiber?" Tips for cleaning fiber. My first tip: every fiber is dirty. Every adaptive panel is dirty. Every patch cord is dirty until you clean it. Okay. But Chuck, it came to me in a sealed bag from the factory, so it's got to be clean, right? No, no. Human production has about a 3% error rate. So if they make 100 patch cords, that means three of them are bad. If they make 1,000 of them, that means 30 of them are bad. So it adds up pretty quickly. Don't assume just because it came from the factory, it's clean. Only assume it's clean if you cleaned it. That's the biggest tip right there. If you want to be successful in fiber, the biggest thing that you can do is keep everything clean. And I got the hiccups now for all of a sudden. Keep everything clean and use the right tools. Use the right tools. So that's the biggest thing I can tell you about fiber, right? The second thing, and you see this happen a lot. I don't have a fiber connector on my desk here. I put my stuff away because I taught a class today. I put all my stuff away already. Um, you'll see people touch the end face with their finger, right? Sometimes accidentally, sometimes on purpose. Did you know that there's oils on your finger? And when you touch that end face, if you actually look at it with a scope afterwards, you will see the oil residue on that end face. So never touch it. I had one guy in the class tell me time we were talking about clean fiber, and he goes, "Oh, I just take the fiber and I just kind of rub it on my shirt." What makes you think your shirt's clean, right? I mean, there's lint and stuff, and you're sweating and you're working in a construction site or whatever. It's dirty too. It's dirty too. So there you go. Now, my first choice when it comes to cleaning any kind of a fiber end, my first choice is always going to be to use a system that it's already designed for it, like a mechanical system. Like for the MTPs, they make those cleaners that go in and clean them automatically, and then they're like on a spool, and so you always have a fresh piece. That's always going to be my preference, always, because that way you're always working with a clean wipe. If in absence of that, you can use 99% isopropyl alcohol and a lint-free wipe Just make sure that you use 99% isopropyl alcohol and not the lower grade stuff. And when you're using alcohol, you got to be super careful because it can absorb moisture from the air around it. So you put moisture and contaminants in that alcohol. So just make sure that you clean that. Right? It's got to be 99% isopropyl alcohol. So let's see here. Let's pick this one. This is another question. Just came in during the session here, and it's from Rick. Rick says, recently we added a new construction project where we were asked to do both VoIP drops as well as data and all the rest, well over 500 drops. The issue is the pushback from the VoIP provider, demanding that they had. Oh, it's a multi-part question. Okay, I got you. Because it only allows for a certain number of characters. Gotcha. Demanding that they had their own lines. The owner asked us to simply do the data, and I had originally spec'd out a rack with space at the top for VoIP stuff. I went ahead and left the top of the rack. The space room would normally do the same account for space for the other company. Okay, so am I missing something? Is there a question here that I'm missing, Rick? I'm I don't I don't see what question you had in there. If you maybe can restate that pretty quickly, I'll give you a couple seconds while I like hit a couple other things. Mark's in the house. Welcome back, Mr. Mark. All right. Oh, there you go. AM fiber cleaning, inspect, clean, inspect again. Everybody has their own little weird sayings for that. Every manufacturer, even the one I work for, we've got one too. You know, inspect, connect, and yeah. So it's got to be clean. It's got to be clean. Alrighty. So Mark asks, what programs do you use to draw or mark up? Now, it's been a long time since I've done a set of red lines, and we would just use AutoCAD, but that was a long time ago. So I'm not sure what programs are even out there today, Mark. Maybe if there's somebody else listening, or maybe watch this recorded, maybe you put a comment in the section below, and I'll reach out to. I got some friends in Low Voltage Nation. I'll put that comment out there as well because they're doing a lot of that kind of stuff. But we would just import it back into AutoCAD and then do that way. So okay. So here Rick is okay. There you go. So he's asking, do you normally count for rack space for other companies on the site if it's not in your scope? That's a great question, Rick. That's a great question. Okay. My first question would be, is there a contract? And is there a scope of work attached to that contract? If the answer is yes, then before I would leave any space in anything, I would say I need to have a change. I need to have a change order issued. Now, a lot of people think change orders means, oh, you're doing more work. It doesn't. A change order doesn't mean that. A change order means what you're contracted to do has changed. So you can do what's called a no charge change order. So what I would suggest is, if you're under contract, reach out to that person, say the person who you contracted with, because remember the scope work says you're going to have a rack and you're going to have your stuff in there. I need a no charge change order that says you want me to leave space for that other contractor or for your people, whatever the case may be. Because my scope of work, which I'm contracted to do, says I got to do A, B, and C, not A, C, and D. Because if you do A, C, and D and you're contracted to A, B, C, you're not doing what you're contracted to do, are you? And you got to be careful. The person who you ask that, do they have the authority to make that change? Okay, that's critical. Do they have the authority to make that change? Because a lot of times the person you may be interacting with is not the person who's in charge of the contract. So you got to make sure that if there is no contract in place, then what I would do is I would reach out to your contact, whoever it is, whoever's responsible to make decisions, and say, look, I've got a request from this contractor to leave this space. If it's from the customer, they would say, do me a favor, give it to me in writing that you want me to leave X amount of rack units in whatever position, whatever rack. The key is documentation, 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 right? Because I'm okay with leaving the space. The issue is not leaving the space. The issue is you're now maybe doing something different than what you're contracted to do. That's where I see a potential conflict. Because when you go in front of a judge and you tell that judge, well, they asked me to leave a space for their thing, the judge will say, do you have that in writing? So I don't have a problem with leaving space for other contractors. I don't have a problem with that. Even if it's a competitor, I'll leave space for them as long as I've got it documented and signed off by the customer. That's the key there. That's the key there. So they say the follow up, he said they went ahead and left at the top blank for this instance from that VoIP company, but normally we require change order. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it's not an issue for leaving the space, but you definitely want to make sure that you document that change because that can come back and haunt you on the tail end. So, all righty, everybody. We are actually 2 minutes past our 30-minute mark. I said this earlier, but a lot of people came on before. I just want everybody to know there will not be any after hours live on Thanksgiving week. Okay. And then also, I talked about in the very beginning of this show some new exciting episodes coming up. I got a cable myth buster episode coming up, and standards update coming up. Interview with a Bixie technician, chip shortage and how that affects our industry. Lots of great shows coming up. Already, they're going to be all coming out. So I hope you guys watch. Make sure you share the show with somebody. We're trying to reach and grow and stuff, and and encourage and enrich the lives of people. And we can't do that just by ourselves. We need your help. Would you mind helping? Share some of our posts and say, hey, you should check out this podcast. You should check out these vlogs. Any help, any help would be greatly appreciated. All right, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Until next time, remember, knowledge is power.